Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're gearing up for a pretty amazing investigation into one of humanity's absolute oldest concepts. But we're not going to be looking at it through the lens of myth or magic. Instead, we're diving straight in through the rigorous, fascinating lens of modern consciousness research. We are exploring the science of the soul. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on some incredible, groundbreaking work by independent researcher John Cantillo, all centering around a concept called experiential persistence. So, if you've ever found yourself wondering how your fundamental sense of self manages to survive a deep sleep, a crazy vivid dream, or even just a massive life change, well, you are definitely in the right place. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this cross-cultural mystery, because this is our primary detective case for today. Across totally diverse cultures and historical traditions, literally spanning thousands of years, concepts that resemble a soul just keep popping up over and over again. You really have to ask yourself, why? Why did so many completely disconnected societies arrive at this exact same basic idea? Was it all just some shared human fear of mortality? Or were they actually observing something very real about human consciousness?
Here's our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll kick things off with this universal soul question, and then we'll define a foundational concept called experiential presence. From there, we'll break down two very distinct forms of persistence, uncover the roots of how continuity actually works in nature, and finally, we'll arrive at a really rewarding scientific reinterpretation of the soul itself.
All right, starting off with Section 1, the universal soul question, a historical mystery. We really need to reframe the historical concept of the soul. It's not just a fairy tale. We should view it as an ancient, honestly brilliant attempt to observe a highly complex phenomenon. Think about your own life for a second. Your body completely changes its cellular makeup over the years. Your deepest beliefs change, your entire environment changes, and yet there's this unbroken thread, right? Across history, humans have felt this continuous, uninterrupted presence within themselves despite all those vastly changing circumstances. Cantillo's research points out that the soul was simply the best possible framework ancient humans could build to explain this obvious continuity of their conscious existence. They noticed that something remained constant, and they just gave that constant a name.
Moving right along to Section 2, defining experiential presence, stripping away the variables.
To start uncovering the actual scientific clues behind this profound feeling of continuity, let's introduce Cantillo's modern research framework. To really grasp this, I want you to try a little thought experiment. Imagine you're in a deep, utterly bizarre dream, or maybe a super profound meditative state. In those altered states of consciousness, certain things that make you can completely vanish. You might lose your autobiographical identity, like you literally forget your own name. You might lose your sense of agency, where you feel like things are just happening to you without your control. You might even lose your physical embodiment entirely, feeling like you don't even have a physical form. But even with all of those major things subtracted from the equation, you are still experiencing something. Experience itself remains.
So the crucial point is this core definition, experiential presence. Think of this as the ultimate leftover ingredient. It is the minimal, totally undeniable fact that experience appears present at all, completely separate from the specific thoughts, structures, or bodily sensations that usually tag along with it. It's the absolute baseline condition. If you strip away literally everything else, experiential presence is what's left over.
Which brings us to Section 3, two forms of persistence, the clues to continuity.
Now that we've got our baseline, we need to break down how this presence actually manages to persist over time. This is where the detective work gets really good. Cantillo splits this persistence into two distinct categories. First up, we have experiential persistence. This is our phenomenological clue. It refers to the actual lived feeling of continuous presence across changing conditions. Think back to those ancient humans waking up from a chaotic, wild dream, yet still feeling like they were the exact same unbroken stream of awareness. This is exactly what they were noticing. It's the continuity of the experience itself.
Now contrast that with the second category, episodic persistence. And hey, don't let the technical terms throw you off here. This simply describes the organizational clue. It's the physical or structural footprint that an event leaves behind in a system. Because when you have an experience, it doesn't just vanish into thin air, right? It leaves enduring modifications in how your brain or your bodily system is organized. It's not some disembodied memory floating in a void somewhere. It's a literal, lasting change in your structural organization.
Now, what's really interesting about this comparison is how it clearly separates the two concepts for us. Experiential persistence asks, what remains present during changing states?
It's all about that inner feeling of continuity. Episodic persistence, on the other hand, asks what remains altered after an experience. It's all about the structural, physical continuity. Honestly, grasping the difference between these two is absolutely crucial. It's the key to unlocking how our consciousness operates on multiple different levels.
On to Section 4, the roots of continuity. How patterns survive change.
So, how do both of these forms of persistence, the inner feeling and the physical footprint, actually survive constant change? Do they share some deeper foundation? I absolutely love this analogy to help visualize organizational continuity. Think of a whirlpool in a fast-moving river. The actual physical water making up that whirlpool is constantly flowing in and flowing right back out. It's literally completely replaced every few seconds. And yet, the whirlpool itself persists. Why? Because the stability comes from the pattern of organization, not from the specific physical material at any given second. And here's the wild part. Your body and your brain are doing the exact same thing right now. You're constantly replacing cells, yet your conscious pattern persists.
To investigate the roots of this, researchers are really having to shift their focus. They're moving beyond just looking at the contents of our consciousness, things like specific thoughts, memories, or visual images, and instead they're looking at the underlying organization. And to do this, they use those extraordinary altered states we mentioned earlier, like deep meditation or sensory deprivation. But rather than viewing these states as bizarre anomalies, researchers treat them as perturbation conditions. Basically, they're using them as stress tests. By pushing the human system to its absolute limits, scientists can see exactly how our organizational patterns bend without breaking in order to maintain our conscious presence.
And finally, Section 5, Reinterpreting the Soul, the Revelation.
All right, this is where we get to bring the deep science of organizational constraint directly back to our opening historical mystery. But before we do, I need to highlight a very strict disclaimer from the research. And honestly, this is a major strength of Cannellino's framework. We are staying entirely neutral here. This research isn't about trying to prove the existence of ghosts, an afterlife, or any religious metaphysics. Not at all. What it is doing is recognizing and scientifically validating an incredibly brilliant ancient human intuition through a rigorous modern lens.
Which brings us to this incredibly powerful conclusion from the paper. Concepts of soulhood may be understood not necessarily as descriptions of independent metaphysical entities, but as interpretations of phenomenological continuity. Think about what this means. Ancient humans weren't just making things up out of nowhere. They were keen, highly empirical observers of experiential persistence. They felt that continuous, unbroken thread of conscious presence, just like the whirlpool maintaining its shape in the river, and they used the soul as their working vocabulary. It was their best conceptual framework to interpret what they were feeling.
So, to summarize our entire journey in this explainer today, we can map it all out in 3 simple steps. Step 1. Humans universally observe a continuous conscious presence. Step 2. Historically, without modern neuroscience, they creatively interpret that observation as soulhood. Step 3. Today, we investigate that exact same observation scientifically as experiential persistence. See, science and history aren't necessarily fighting here at all. They are simply looking at 2 different descriptive levels of the exact same, completely fascinating human phenomenon.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this pretty provocative thought. If the soul was just our very first version 1.0 theory to explain this incredible persistence of experience, what is modern science going to reveal next about our conscious continuity? As we shift from just studying basic neural pathways to really decoding these complex organizational correlates, we're standing on the brink of understanding not just what we think, but how the sheer miraculous fact of our experience manages to survive the absolute chaos of existing. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep exploring, stay completely curious, and I'll see you next time.